Well, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to A Therapeutic Edge. Before we go any further, please subscribe. I'd love to have you here on a regular basis. On the table in front of us is the newest piece in my Andre de Villers ADV collection. This is the ADV Alpha, and oh my God, this thing is a monster. Pictures did not do it justice. This is a really interesting knife from him. I have some others, which I will show you. I mean, I'm not going to show them all to you, but let's do this. So this is the newest one. This is the oldest one. This is my Pathfinder, which I think of as a big knife, and as you can see, the Alpha here completely dwarfs it. This is a relatively new addition, although it's not that new. This is his Badlands Bowie, which is very similar in construction and design to the Pathfinder here, but with a very, very different blade. And then, of course, I have just one of my favorite knives. This is the Tack Butcher. You really got to like this kind of a blade to like this knife, and I do. As I said, I think of these as my big knives. But man, when this Alpha, excuse my arm, when this Alpha landed, it really changed things. So how big is it? And what is it? Well, let's talk about it. I'll put these marvelous tools away. And again, knives are tools. The ADV Alpha is an S35VN blade. It is a titanium frame with fat carbon inlays. These happen to be red. There's even an inlay here on this. What's this? This is a button lock. There's a flipper tab and a deployment hole, and I love that deployment hole. Look at the milling they did on the blade. It gives it purchase, it gives it interest. You can flick it with, like, oh, this thing is great. But the real party piece, man, the button lock is just fantastic. It is also locking. Now, I'm not a huge fan of locking knives, but in this case, unlike most locking knives, because it locks the button, this thing locks closed. And I do like that. Most locking knives lock only open, which is annoying because I know it's open. What I don't want to find out is that it's opened by accident. And in this case, you don't have to worry about that because the lock works when it's closed. That is a really nice feature. The action on this knife is, well, I mean, it's ADV good. He does this as well as anybody. The action on these knives is fantastic. As I said, the blade is S35VN. It is running on bearings. It is a lot of S35VN. And I know some of you are going to look at that blade shape and say, it's got a recurve and I don't like it. And I hate that stuff. Hey, look, I get it. But this is my knife. You don't have to have one. They make something called the Pit Boss, which is a very similar handle without a recurve on the blade. So if you're interested, there are alternatives. It is a swedged harpoon-style blade, right? So there's a great spot for your thumb to land if you have really big hands. If you don't, most of us, your thumb's going to land right about here, right where it's supposed to on this jimping. But I can get forward, which means that little bit of recurve is great for cutting media, because when you're pushing forward, particularly push cuts through media like this, or like this, that little bit of recurve holds the material in place as you're slicing along. There is a mountain of belly. The whole tip of this knife. This thing is fantastic. Even I've used it to cut up vegetables and stuff in the kitchen because of all this belly. If you tip it just a little bit forward, you can rock cut and chop. You know, it's just a marvelously designed tool. Now, the shape of the handle, a lot of people don't like knives that force your hand into a particular position. I understand that. I have particularly large hands, and it is, well, I mean, I don't know, they're not enormous, but whatever. They're big. This thing fits me like it was made for me. He makes a smaller version of this called the Javelin, which is a 3.5-inch blade and a much shorter handle. I actually thought about getting one of those because the Javelin's got a compound grind and a bunch of other stuff that's really interesting. But I know now that if I'd gotten the Javelin, it would have been too small for me. So if you got big hands and you like a big knife, check out the Alpha. So how much S35VN do you get? Well, you get 4 full inches of cutting on 4.25 inches, a little over 4.25 inches of S35VN. Right? It technically, to the back here, it is a 4.5-inch blade. Right? So 4 inches of cutting on 4.5 inches of S35VN. The grip area from behind the choil is 3.3 and 1, 2, 3 3/4, right? You would have a lot more space without this rise right here. Believe me, you know, a little over 3 3/4 my hand fits in perfectly. So for most people, you're going to have plenty of room here. These notches, these sort of choils back here, the way they're designed, they're very comfortable, but they do allow for quick access to changing the position of the knife in your hand. And while you are forced to sort of hold it in one position, you know, depending on how you want to do it, the position just makes sense. That's really good. Let's do the size comparison stuff that we do. We'll do it against some knives that you're familiar with. You might be familiar with. Here it is against a knife that is very similar in size. Let's line the blades up. As you can see, the Formax here is a little bit longer, but that's only in the handle. You get the same amount of cutting on the Alpha as you do on the Formax. And I will tell you, I love this knife. This thing is a monster and ridiculous. Because of how tall this blade is, from edge to edge, I mean, it is, right, what are we talking about? 1.5 inches from the bottom of this belly to the top of the blade. Because the flat is way up here and really small, this thing comes way down to an absolute laser beam edge. It's really well done. Let's do some size comparisons against something a little more familiar. Here it is against the the full-size Presidio 2. As you can see, the Alpha is much, much bigger. And just for grins, here it is against the Bug Out. Right. The Bug Out is basically a spare tire. You could put it up inside. Look at that. I'm just kidding. No, come on. The Alpha is a monster. Now, these are about $460. Yeah, that's a lot of money. I recently had the 8020s on my channel that are, you know, $425 or $625, depending on what you get. And for that much money, you know, the 8020s were awesome, but this knife is more artistic. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that again, but I just know this. For me, I had to sell a stack of knives to put the money together for this. My collection is reducing as I refine what I want. This is a really just interesting knife. Now, you've got a lanyard hole back here in case you lanyard. You've got a backspacer. It's made out of titanium with a little bit of jimping. You have got a really nice pocket clip that is relatively deep carry, right? There's a little tiny bit of knife that sticks out, but not much. The front end of this pocket clip actually has a bearing in it. There's a roller ball, which, let's see if we can get that to show. Yeah, right there. It's actually a roller ball at the end of this thing. So even though it's got plenty of spring, that roller ball helps this thing on both directions, in and out of the pocket. It's a really nice feature. His older stuff, the bearing is visible, which is great, except stuff can get into it from the outside. So he's now covered it, and it's embedded inside the pocket clip, which is just a really nice feature. The clip itself is beautiful. It's milled, sort of matched the rest of the style of the knife. And again, the fat carbon on this thing, look at this red and silver and black. God, this is beautiful. I love the little bit of milling and the work around the pivots, which give it a little bit of style. Look, here's the thing. I know in my heart of hearts that this is not the knife for everybody. I get it. It sure is a knife for me, though. All right. Should we weigh it? Are we curious what a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 3/4 inch long knife weigh? I am, so I'm going to weigh it. I haven't done this yet, and I've had this for a couple of weeks. See, I saved the exciting stuff for you guys. Aren't you thrilled? Just say yes. All right, 7.9 ounces. Is that a lot? Well, the XM24 is 7.7. And the the Formax here is 10.3. So if your scale is enormous knives, big knives, then no, it's not that heavy. If your scale is the Bug Out, then yes, this is very heavy. But that is going to be up to you and what you tend to drop in your pocket. for me, and the knives that I like to carry, let's see, the Pathfinder here, 7.3 versus 7.9. So you get a lot more knife. These are milled quite a bit, right? You get a lot more knife here for only less than an ounce more. I think it's really cool. Let's go ahead and see how much of that S35 VN you get. I'll put these back on the table just because I think they're pretty. All right. At its thickest point, the blade is almost 4.5 millimeters. But that's kind of his jam. This is 4.35, right? So he likes thick blades with a lot of drop down to the edge. Am I recommending that you go out and get one of these? Yeah, absolutely. If the ADV aesthetic is your thing, right? And as I said, if you don't like the the recurve here, they make a version similar knife to this called the Pit Boss that does not have it. That would be up to you. And they make this in, oh my, because these are basically mid-tech customs, right? They make these. You can get one with a full-on mirror polish blade or a stonewash blade, or you want it, you can have it. And I really like that as well. Now the turnaround time from the time you order is a few weeks, as much as a month. But that's because these are coming from South Africa, which is where Andre lives. Now this is number 135 in 2021. Let's see if we can get that to show up. There we go. That means that there are 135 other alphas out there. Not two of them look the same, or they're very, very rarely two of them look the same. So you won't find this exact one, but you can get one that's all black. I've seen that on his Instagram. You can get one with blue. You can get one with a plain blade in similar colors to this. I love that diversity and that fluidity of choice. You can really make these your own. And that's where we're going to wrap it up. This wonderful monster is the ADV Alpha. It is the newest part of my ADV collection. I hope you've enjoyed this look at it. And if you haven't, I understand. This knife is not for everyone. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about the ADVs or any of the knives I've shown on the channel, feel free to ask down in the comments below. We'll see you next time.